Hello, and welcome to the Hello You Show, where big dreams meet real action. Through transformative stories, a bit of neuroscience, and real conversations, this show is here to help you explore creating your next level life with authenticity and passion. I am Jessica Rice, a design techie and former engineering leader turned vision evolution coach on a mission to help other women rise up and lead a life of purpose. So get cozy and say hello again to the real you. Hello, welcome back to the Hello You Show. My name is Jessica Rice and I am your host. Thank you so much for joining me today. And today is a really special day for me because it's my birthday, one more year around the sun for me. And as I continue to move in my 40s, I'm going to say move into my 40s. I'm almost at mid 40s here. There's a few things that start to come up for me and I recognize within myself that are very different from what I used to think when I would have to celebrate my birthday when I was younger. And one of the things that I start to recognize is that only I am able or capable of bringing myself the true joy that I'm looking for when it comes to, say, celebrating a birthday or a milestone or any other accomplishment that I experience in my life. And why is this so vital to understand? It's not that other people don't bring me joy, but only true joy and fulfillment can come, say, from within and from God. Those of you who followed me know that I have a long story with my faith and coming back to my faith and having an adventure with spirituality. And, one of the things that I really wanted to recognize, because birthdays historically for me have been incredibly painful. It's not that I had amazing parents, but as I got older, I also had other relationships in my life that really did a lot of things to kind of tear me down on my birthday. And so sometimes for a long time, I really struggled with celebrating myself because that's how it felt like I'm supposed to celebrate myself, and it just kind of felt weird and wrong. And then we have expectations of other people to fill us up with a sense of joy and celebration, which always feels a little bit odd, right? I have some friends who are amazing, and they're really amazing at celebrating and creating plans for their birthdays because they know that other people aren't going to be able to carry it out for them. I still struggle with some of that sometimes, but what I do recognize in myself is that no one else is going to fulfill this deeper need other than me. And I want to talk a little bit about that today because I think it's incredibly important as I go to one more year. And as you think about, where is it that I want to go with this year in my life? I do feel like this year is so important. This is the year for change. We have just gone through so many years of hardship, starting in the pandemic, right? And it's just kind of kept going and going and going. And how many of us are just so ready for some change in our lives? So if this is you, and I want you to think about what is it that I really want to create? And what does it require of me to make it happen? Number one, we cannot look to other people to be able to see our dreams, our vision, what it is that we have, in our lives that continually is calling and trying to pull us forward in a specific direction. And I know in my life when I was first starting out and I had started to share with people, like, this is what I want to create with my life. This is what I want to start doing. I want to make this huge pivot from software engineering over into coaching and really helping people and sharing my story and doing things that light me up. I'm going to be honest, like some of them looked at me as though I was crazy. I didn't know what the heck, they didn't know what happened to me. Like, what types of drugs is she on? What is she doing? And then there were people in my life who were supportive, but they still couldn't really see it because there was a side of me that I had stifled for such a long time because it was my comfort zone. I was in my comfort zone. And it was really hard to let certain aspects of myself come out while I was still in this place. And so if you are struggling to let other people to see that side of you, if you are struggling to know where to begin, I want you to remember that the only way to create change in your life is to first take action. Sometimes we can't start becoming that person that we're supposed to be until we start moving in that trajectory. And there's things that I have been called to do and that I have taken on and that I've started doing that are way outside of my comfort zone and that I could not have foreseen for myself back then. Now, understand, it takes a bit of planning. I mean, I'm not telling you that you should just quit one day your job and go out and go do these things. Yes, that happens sometimes. And maybe that's right, but I'm certainly not going to advocate to just quit anything. What I am going to say is make a plan and run for or toward something that feels right for you in your life. Sometimes we start following a trajectory because it's just there. We didn't make a choice. It just happened to be there. It's just like our family members or certain friends that we have in our lives. How did these people come into our lives? It wasn't because we put them there, they just were there. And so they're a part of our lives. But we also have a choice to how we start to design our lives and how to craft it and what direction that we start to move if we're listening and paying attention. So the first thing I want you to really consider for yourself is, am I listening to the right people? Am I listening to the right things? Am I listening to my intuition? And if you know me, then I consider intuition also God's voice in my life and what it is that He is calling me to do. Does this feel like it's in alignment? And if there's parts of you that don't feel quite right about it, then it's time for you to start digging back inward and asking yourself why that is. Either it's not a right fit, or if you're moving in a specific direction and something feels right off, then maybe that's not quite right. And you have to continue to pivot until it starts to feel right for you. And this is why it's so important that we don't wait for other people to fill that cup for us. Only we, and I say we, when I say we, I mean me and God, can fill that cup because other people aren't going to be able to do it for us. Expectations are the killer of dreams. If I were to continually wait for other people to see the visions that I have been given, I would wait forever because it's not their vision. It's not their dream. They can't see it fully because they have their own dreams, their own visions that they have to take action on in their own lives. And so while we might have people in our lives who are there as a support network for us, who believe in us and push us forward, we can't expect for them to see the whole picture because it wasn't fully given to them. Now, some of us who really are on this calling and this path and start to understand, like, this is a trajectory, this is a journey, may not see the full picture, but they are there as a partner, as a guide, as a witness to what it is that we are there to create, to cultivate, to bring into being, so to speak. And those are the people that you can partner with on this path so that when you feel low, they're there to help carry you and keep you lifted up. But there are a few things that I want to mention. That number one, on this past year, especially in this growth for my business, the things that have been taking place, this podcast, all of the things that have been happening, I had a few key moments where I had to recognize for myself that number one, I couldn't put so much value, I couldn't place so much value on another individual because they were always going to fall short. And the reason that they're going to fall short is because they're only human and they're on their own path and they can't fully see my path. And so that's where we have to create really fine boundaries between a mentor and a coach and other people who are in our lives as a support and a partner, to still coming back to our core center and our foundation and what it is that we were called to do. because we're here to follow the trajectory and that higher calling that we have, not someone else's. And so if we're putting too much value into someone else's advice, their words, their mentorship, that's where we have to be really careful not to go down the path that isn't quite right. And the other thing is, of course, to not wait for everybody else to give us permission. You aren't going to get permission or a magical sign necessarily to start embarking on your journey. But what you do need is to sit with yourself and to recognize, okay, if I wait and I wait and I wait and I wait for this perfect moment, it may never come. Because sometimes we're so accustomed to living inside our comfort zone, our golden handcuffs, whether that's your job where you have, your retirement, maybe you have bonuses, you have stock invested, you've got different things like, oh, it's financially a challenge for me to up and leave. So I might as well just stay here. And then if I get that sign, then maybe I'll, when the conditions are perfect, then I'll do it. And sometimes it's just not how it works. I know when I left my job in corporate and software engineering, there was certainly a point that I had planned to that I could then say, okay, I think now is this time to walk away and to truly start embarking on this journey that I'd already started. Now, mind you, it had already been 4-5 years that I had started making this transition, this pivot for myself. It really wasn't this overnight thing. To some people, it might have seemed that way because I wasn't sharing everything with everyone. But for those who were a part of my life on a deeper level, they knew that I had been going through training and certification and classes and really digging deep into who I was and what it was that I was there to create and cultivate with my life that was separate or apart from the work that I had been doing previously. And so that was a big transition and shift for me, but I still found it to be incredibly scary to leave. And I know that my family did as well. It wasn't a simple, like, yes, it's like, oh, we're ready to go. And it's like, perfect. It wasn't. And I think that's intentional, right? Because if we always had the foresight right before we're about to embark on a journey of all of the trials and tribulations that we might experience, we would never go. We aren't always supposed to know everything, but that is also how we learn, because the only way to learn is through action. The only way to grow is through a little bit of that stretch, a little bit of discomfort, a little bit of pain sometimes, because then we're able to learn how to adapt and change and pivot. But if everything is always perfect, then we're not growing and we're not learning and we're not challenging ourselves and we're not really embarking on anything. And so part of the thing that we have to understand is that any time that we are about to go and change and make a pivot in our lives is that we can start to expect some pushback, some challenges. Anytime that you're moving forward, right? It's like cars. We have to have aerodynamics within cars because if we had block-shaped cars, then we would be hitting the wind. There's always a force that we are pushing against. So we have to figure out, how do we make it through? I was on a call recently and we said, creativity, chaos follows creativity. So anytime that we're about to create something, chaos follows. And that's not to necessarily be a negative thing. It's just that we can expect, because we're disrupting our lives. Whenever you create something, you are also disrupting something that's already in existence. And whether that's in your role or whether it's in some other aspect of your life, you know this to be true. When I was in UX and design and software engineering, anytime that we had to make a change to the site or a change in the user experience or what it is that they were about to experience, we knew it was going to receive some pushback because people don't like change. And here we are trying to make improvements, but we're also changing the normal flow or pattern. I mean, if you have developed ever a workaround in software. Maybe you knew that there was something like, oh, this is kind of wonky, but you figure out a workaround and it now starts to work for you. And that becomes the pattern or the habit that you start to have. And even if they go and fix it and change it and make it better, now you have to relearn the steps that you had to learn as the workaround. And that might even still be frustrating for you because now you have to stop and you have to think and it's going to be different. Well, that's life, right? That's everything that we experience. And so there's a couple of things that I wanted to share in terms of how you can start to think about stepping out in your life and having courage. I was at church yesterday and I was so filled and moved by the sermon that was being given. And so a lot of it was about how we can be more bold in our life. And he was covering Romans, he was covering Acts 4, and he was talking about courage. And he was saying that, there's this phrase, courage under fire, right? Maybe you've even seen the movie at some point, but sometimes courage comes in the face of adversity, right? Bravery doesn't come because it's easy, it just becomes necessary. And when I work with a lot of transitioning special forces officers who were coming out of 20 years in the service and they're coming into civilian life. A lot of them have faced incredible adversity and incredible courage. Things I cannot possibly begin to understand, and then they can't really share with me anyways. But sometimes I get a little bit of a glimpse. And it's not because these are the most brave people that you've ever met. I mean, they are. And they're highly trained and they're highly qualified. But it's also because sometimes we have a forcing function and our brains require a forcing function. It's the same thing as when, you see those things about a mom who lifts up a car off of her child. Right now, she has like superhuman strength. She didn't walk in with superhuman strength. All of a sudden, she just found it within herself because it was required of her at that moment. And so sometimes we just have to be brave. And so one of the things he said is courage is simply not one of the virtues, but it is the foundation for every virtue because we cannot create momentum and growth and change in our lives if we don't take action and we don't have the courage to go forth. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's just going forward anyways. And so whenever you're thinking about doing something important in your life, like following your higher calling, making a transition, taking a leap of faith, it's going to require courage, but it's not going to be without some pressure, without some adversity, without a little bit of chaos. And that is one of the ways that you know that this might be something to pay attention to. Because more often than not, when we're going and we're out and we're thinking, oh, this is a big thing that I want to go do in my life. And if nobody is saying anything to you, nobody is saying, oh, that's a little bit, are you sure? Are you sure that's what you want to do? Then maybe it's not even, is that the thing that's worth looking into? Or maybe you're not even dreaming big enough, or maybe you need to really think about, is this the right path? I know that sounds a little bit counterintuitive, but sometimes we know we're on the right path because other people are looking at it and they don't see it and they're going to think, good luck. We'll see how that turns out for them, right? All of those naysayers. So that's one thing is we got to have courage and we got to really think about what is it that we're coming into and prepare ourselves for the chaos that potentially is going to ensue, right? We have to walk through the valley in order to reach the mountaintop. And so I want you to remember that just because you've decided to make a decision doesn't mean that it's going to necessarily be easy, but you do it because you know that this is the life that you've been called to do. And if you're going to allow for your dreams to die, waiting for the perfect person to say, yes, I believe in you, or the right magical moment, then you might wait forever. Another thing I want you to think about is there's certain laws So we have different laws. There's the law of momentum, the law of gravity, the law of thermodynamics, and the law of advancement. And this says that when we are thinking about how we want to move forward, you know, sometimes we're always looking for the easy route, right? How do I make this less painful, right? Our brain doesn't like pain. We don't like to have discomfort. We want to stay warm and we want to stay safe. But we can't always find a workaround. And so the law of advancement is that whatever goes up must first go down. And we see this in the world sometimes, right? If you see a plane that's taking off on the runway and it's starting to hit those high speeds, you'll see it kind of like go down and then it will lift off, right? Because the weight of the air and the gravity is like it pushes it down and then it can propel off. And the same thing can happen, say, with a ball. If you take a tennis ball or a basketball and you want it to bounce really high, well, you don't just like throw it up. You could. I just hit my desk. You just throw it up. But what you really want to do is like you have to like bounce it down first. Then it will shoot up into the sky, right? And then you get some momentum going. And so we have to be able to think about what is that blast off point for us? How are we crouching down so that we can shoot off? How are we readying ourselves? How are we preparing ourselves? And that's where personal resilience and grit, as Angela Duckworth talks about, comes into play and is so important so that we can be ready and able to handle some of the changes and the pressure that we're going to undergo with knowing that we're there to go set it off, right? I knew that when I was walking away from my role that it wasn't going to be easy, but it already hadn't been easy. I had already been spending nights and weekends studying. I already had a pretty good client base while I was still working my full-time job and homeschooling my son. I already felt like everything was happening. And now it was just time to release and let this piece of myself go in order for this piece of my life to bloom. And so you have to remember, you are like a bud, and we are there to bloom and to grow. But if you stay within the same pot, you can't grow. You have to go into another bigger pot. And so at some point in our lives, we have to be ready and willing to go and transition into something that might be a little bit painful at first, knowing that it's going to be the necessary key in order for us to grow and become whatever God has intended us for us to become. We may not fully see every picture, an ounce, and beautiful leaf and branch that comes out from us. But what we will start to see is that person that's been inside, that's been root bound for so long, is able to start to emerge. And sometimes when there's people who don't see the value in us, they don't believe in us, it's because we've only allowed for them to see this person here who's stayed in comfort, who's played small, who's played safe, who didn't make any waves, who fit in, who was accepted, right? And as soon as we start to step out of that, that's when we can start to come under fire because we are now putting ourselves out in a bigger way. We're separating ourselves from the pack. And that's a little bit, you know, the opposite of where our pack mentality brain wants to be, right? We're safe in numbers. If we stand out too much, we stand out too much. Now other people, other animals, other threats can see us more readily. However, we don't grow in that space. Now, this is not to say that partnerships and networking aren't important. Again, if we're talking about what we're cultivating, if we think about the people who have been in our life because of circumstances versus the people who are in our lives because we found them and we cultivated and created that life for ourselves, that's very different. And there's this amazing thing that starts to happen when you start finding people in your life that you have, I'm going to say that not you put there, but that start coming across your path because you actively sought them out. You actively started to seek out people who challenged you, who stretched you, who pushed you, who believed in you, who understood and got that this is the trajectory, this is this journey, and they're on it too. Amazing things start to happen to take place in your life because you're not surrounded by these people here who believe one way. And you can start to see there's a whole other world out there of other people who you can surround yourself with as well. And you don't need the validation of some other people any longer. You don't need their acceptance. You don't necessarily need their approval or their permission to go forth and be who you are. There's this story I heard recently called Giraffes and Turtles. And I had never heard this before. It said, how do we understand whether we're a giraffe or a turtle, right? And those of us who have a big vision can maybe understand this because we're been gifted this idea within our lives that there's something greater that we are here to do, this legacy that we're here to create, this impact that we're to make. And I do believe that all of us have that, but some of us just, maybe it's lying dormant or we're not paying attention. But if you're thinking about how you really move this into action and think about what it is that you want to do, of course, you're going to get pushback, right? You're going to get pushback from people who aren't of the same mind, who aren't living out this vision that you are now starting to see and to cultivate within your life. But it's not their fault because it's just their perception of reality. So if we think about giraffes, right? Giraffes, here they are, these long, tall, elegant creatures with these incredibly long necks. And where do they eat at? Well, they eat at the treetops, right? They have these long necks and they eat up at the leaves and they can look out and they can see the whole world and the valleys and everything around them. And it's not their fault that they have these really, really long necks. This is what they've been given from God. This is where they eat. They eat from these tall trees. And then sometimes like there's turtles and they're so lovely and so special. And they're short and they've got little short legs and they have these amazing hard little shells and they can tuck themselves inside of that. And so they eat at the grass level and they can see all the little bugs and the things that are going around onto the surface. And that's their perspective. That's what they see. And it's not their fault, right? And so if we're asking, here's this giraffe who can see everything that's going on in the world around them. And then here's a turtle who can basically, it just sees what's happening right in front of them. They can see all the little ants and the ant holes. And maybe the giraffe can't really see like where to step on some of those ant holes or mounds, but the turtle can. But then we're asking the turtle if it can see out into the valley and across the trees, over to the mountain ridges and the herds of animals across the plains. It's neither one's fault, right? Because this is what God has given them. This is the long neck that the giraffe has been receiving. And then the turtle, he sees his own things in its own way. What is interesting to know is when a giraffe lowers its head for too long, right? So it comes down to where the turtle is, to go and just see what the turtle is, because the turtle's telling the giraffe, like, oh no, there's not all this other stuff. You need to come down here so you can see where I'm seeing. So the giraffe lowers its head for too long. It will start to lose blood flow and it will pass out. So when turtles are telling us that whatever it is that we're out there to go and do, whatever this big vision is, this big calling, this thing that we're supposed to go out and march toward on, that it won't work because it sees what it sees. And we start to falter or pass out. That's because we've lowered our head for too long. So if you're built to be really tall, you're going to endanger yourself. You're going to endanger your well-being if you continue to lower your perspective to where the turtles are telling you it's not possible. And I want you to think about how many possibilities in your life have you given up because you've been listening to people who don't share the same dreams, the same visions, the same ambition and drive and perspective that you carry. Think about where it is that you want to take this year for your life. Really get in alignment, you and God. What is it He's called you to do? It takes courage to step out in faith. It takes courage to follow your dreams. It's not because your head is just up in the clouds and it's not possible. It's because you have to come into alignment with what that is and then come up with strategies to make it happen. So that when you step out, it's not just on a whim per se, but you also have to have a degree of faith. You have to have a degree of resilience and grit, and you have to be willing to undergo a little bit of that pain and that stretch. But once you do, that's where you start to take momentum, right? What goes up has to first go down a little bit. So that's where that stretch comes in. And it always feels uncomfortable when we're ready or we're about to embark on something and we're feeling it. Just like when the plane's about to take off, we can all feel it and we get a little bit of that rush of excitement. I'm not sure if you felt that. And then there it goes. And there's no going back. So I want you to consider, where is it that you want to take your life? What are the steps that you need? And are you surrounding yourself with the right people who are there to believe and support you on your journey? And if you're not, find them, because they're out there. They're on similar journeys as you. They may not see the same vision. They may not have the same dreams, but they will get it. And they're going to get you. And they're going to believe in you. And this is how you start changing the course of your life. If you have any questions, if you're unsure of where to even begin, or you would just like to chat with somebody, please reach out to me. I love talking to new people. I love hearing their stories. I love hearing about their big visions and their dreams for their lives. So please reach out. We can never have too many people in our lives who really are there to help further our mission along. And I'm very excited. Please join us next week and the week after and the week after. We have some really special and amazing guests. I am just so excited to share them with you. I can't believe they're on our show, and it's going to be incredible. So please stay tuned for some of our more upcoming episodes. And I just want to thank you for spending some time with me and sharing this day with me. It really makes my birthday feel special to share it with you. All right, enjoy the rest of your day, and we will see you next week. Thank you for tuning into the Hello You Show. It's been a pleasure to have you with us on this journey today. If you found value in our conversation and want to support the show, please take a moment to like, follow, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. We'd also deeply appreciate it if you could leave us a review. Your feedback not only helps us grow, but also enables others seeking inspiration and authenticity to discover our community. Until next time, keep embracing your story with purpose.